What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Really excited to have my first mock draft up on the channel. Gonna have at least 2 or 3 more. Normally, I have my first round mock draft up probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, but we're gonna do a lot of them. We're gonna do a lot of 7 round mock drafts for the Giants as well as it draws nearer. I'll talk about some of the later prospects that I like for the Giants specifically. This is for the entire league, though, and I'm really excited to jump into it. Talk about some of the needs from around the league, not just for the Giants, but potentially for your team. And obviously, a lot of you guys are gonna disagree with me. That's what happens when you do these mock drafts. Nobody's ever gonna be happy with your selection. Some people will, some people won't. So just keep in mind it's a guessing game. I know everybody has their favorites for the teams around the league who may be watching this, and as Giants fans, we'll see how it all plays out. Speaking from a Giants fan specifically, I'm really excited about this draft. There's a lot at stake for the New York Giants. We have the 5th and 7th overall pick. In terms of needs for the team, I mean, you pick a position, we probably need it. Some could argue we certainly need a quarterback. Obviously, the offensive line is a major need for this team. It's been for quite some time. Inside linebacker, edge rusher, potentially cornerback if we're to trade James Bradbury. Wide receiver even, you could definitely argue is a need for this team when you look around this roster. Bottom line is the New York Giants need very good football players. The good news is they sit in a prime position to be able to do so, not just with the 5th and 7th pick, but a very early 2nd-round pick as well. I believe we picked 36th overall. Won't jump into that selection in this draft, but the Giants do have a lot of draft capital in this draft. We'll see how it all plays out. Now, the first pick, and we're going to pull up the simulator for this. It's just a lot easier for me, and then we'll go over it. The first pick is the Jacksonville Jaguars, and if you would have asked me, a 3 weeks ago, what I think the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to do, I said for sure it's going to be a tackle due to the fact that Trevor Lawrence coming into his 2nd year, you have to do everything in your power to be able to get the most out of your quarterback. And just because the Jaguars franchise tag Cam Robinson doesn't make it impossible for them to take a guy like Evan Neal or Aquanu out of NC State, but much more unlikely, which as a Giants fan makes me happy. I want to tackle, and specifically one of those two with our pick at 5th overall. And if the Jaguars go with an edge rusher, it at least increases the probability that one of those two individuals could fall to the New York Giants. I could potentially see the Jaguars trading out of this pick. I'm not saying it's likely, but if the Jaguars feel maybe, say the Houston Texans want to make sure they could come up and get a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, they could drop to 3, get a guy like Aquanu. I suppose it's possible, but I'm going to have them standing at number 1 overall, and I'm going to actually have them getting the edge rusher and getting the guy that will replace what they, get themselves a top-tier edge rusher opposite Josh Allen for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm going to go with Aiden Hutchinson to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I've seen a lot of people starting to mock this. This was kind of where the mocks were about 2 months ago. Then they started to say Evan Neal or Aquanu could go to the Jaguars at 1st overall. Now it seems like most people are back on the edge train after they franchise tag their left tackle. Number 2 overall, of course, last year, the Detroit Lions spent a very high draft pick on a tackle. I don't see that taking place this year. I think they're going to continue to try to assert the trenches, but on the other side of the ball. One player that's been dropping down a ton in a lot of these mock drafts, and one player that a lot of New York Giants fans are probably hoping drops to them at 5th overall, is Kayvon Thibodeaux. Thibodeaux is regarded as arguably the most talented player in this draft for quite some time out of Oregon. Some people question his drive on the field. I know he had an injury this past season, but Kayvon Thibodeaux, I think the talent is too much to pass up here for the Detroit Lions. They're going to go out and sign themselves the 2nd edge rusher in the first 2 picks. Now, if there was one team in these top 4 I could potentially see taking a quarterback, it would probably be the Detroit Lions. They, of course, have Jared Goff, who I think will be a placeholder for another year until such time they look for a quarterback. But I have the 2 edge rushers going 1st and 2nd in my first mock draft. Number 3 overall, the Houston Texans. Texans could go a lot of ways, and if one of those 2 edge rushers falls to them at 3, I could certainly see them going that route. But in this scenario, I think the Texans are going to actually go with the offensive line here. And I'm not going to go with maybe one of the players that you guys feel is the most likely here with Evan Neal. I've seen him mocked all over the place. I'm going to go with Aquanu. I personally think Aquanu is the best offensive lineman in this year's draft class. I'm not an expert by any means. I've looked at film, and he's been a guy that's impressed me since I started doing my research. The guy's big, he's mean, he's tough, he's super athletically gifted, and if the Texans could get a guy with the upside that Aquanu possesses, I think they're going to go out and do it. He could play both the guard and the tackle spot. Obviously, if you're taking him 3rd overall, you project him to be a tackle. Had a fabulous combine. I think he ran a 4.93, super athletic, super mean, super tough, and I really like this pick for the Houston Texans. 4th overall for the New York Jets. Could go a lot of ways here. They could use a wide receiver. I think it's a bit too early there. They could continue to shore up that offensive line. They've done that each of the first 2 drafts. They've taken 2 first-round offensive linemen. Wouldn't shock me if Joe Douglas did that here. Of course, you still have Evan Neal on the board, but one player I've seen pegged to the Jets a lot. I know they've taken a safety in the past. Their head coach has talked about how Kyle Hamilton could potentially be a unicorn-type prospect that you can't ignore. Maybe he will, maybe he won't go to the Jets. A lot of people argue that Hamilton is potentially the best overall player in this year's draft. Even though it's a little bit early to take a safety, I'm going to have the Jets doing so here, and they're going to shore up that secondary, getting themselves, like I said, arguably the best overall player in this draft. Goes 4th overall to the New York Jets out of Notre Dame. Kyle Hamilton, he's big, he's strong, and he's a really good football player. Now, the New York Giants. And, of course, Evan Neal could be off the board at this point in time. I don't have that in my first mock draft. Had the Jets taken Evan Neal, what would I have done? Well, if I'm the Giants, I'm picking up the phone, and I'm potentially looking to make a trade to get out of that 5th overall selection. The Panthers pick at 6. They could potentially take a quarterback. And, if a team wants to say trade up and get a quarterback, that could be an ideal spot. You look at the Atlanta Falcons at 8. They could potentially be in the quarterback market. The Denver Broncos no longer will be, along with Washington, being that they went out and got quarterback. So I think the quarterback market is kind of starting to shrink at the beginning of this draft. I think the 2 teams that benefited the most from that are probably the New Orleans Saints, who are picking later in this draft, along with probably, I would say the Saints probably benefited more so than anybody else, being that they need a quarterback, and the Pittsburgh Steelers picking 20th overall. There's a good chance they pick it, or potentially even Malik Willis could slide a lot further than people think. But in this scenario, Evan Neal's there. I don't even think twice. Right now, the New York Giants' biggest need, we could all agree, is on the offensive line, at least in my opinion. Now you have 2 bookend tackles for a really long time. You got Thomas on the left, you got Neal on the right, and the New York Giants address their biggest need and probably is the best overall player on the board. So I think it's a slam dunk pick for the New York Giants at 5th overall. Number 6 overall, you've heard a lot of rumors that the Carolina Panthers are interested in taking Charles Cross. I think in the end, with as good of a combine as Malik Willis had, I don't think they're sold on Sam Darnold, nor do I think they should be. Willis is there at 6. If he falls here, I am going to have the Carolina Panthers going out there and taking their quarterback. If I'm Matt Rule, I look at it like this. I could go out and get a young quarterback. I signed a 7-year commitment. It gives me a little bit more time for me to mold my young quarterback. You do have some potent weapons over there, but you really need to shore up that offensive line with the rest of your draft. Definitely a weakness for that Carolina Panthers football team, but I'm going to have the Panthers being the first team to take a quarterback. The New York Giants back on the clock here, and they took Evan Neal, which they addressed, in my opinion, their biggest need. I think in the end, the New York Giants are going to end up trading James Bradbury and the cornerback in this draft. And again, it's kind of need with best overall that fits what the New York Giants are looking to do. Ahmad Sauce Gardner. I was tempted to take Sauce Gardner at 5th overall, but the way I look at it is Evan Neal is a arguably better player and a bigger need. The other thing I'll say is I don't think Carolina is going to take a cornerback a year after they took J.C. Horn. So if I'm the Giants and Ahmad Gardner gets to me, I probably wait to 7 regardless of who I'm taking at 5. If I want to take a tackle and Neal's off the board, I probably still take Charles Cross. If I want to take Cross and I wait till 7 to take Gardner. But Gardner just makes way too much sense for the defensive scheme that the New York Giants are looking to implement. He's a man press cover corner. He's like 6'3", super long arms. He's not the type of prospect at that position that comes around every year. His upside is through the roof. Again, had a very impressive combine. So I think Ahmad Sauce Gardner has done nothing but to improve his draft stock. And I just think that he fits what we're looking to do on defense. So I think it's a really good pick by the New York Giants there to get what they hope could be a lockdown corner for years to come at 7th overall. That's going to bring up the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons could go so many ways here. One guy you've heard a lot about, and the Falcons, much like the Giants, need a lot of help all over their roster. But one guy that you've heard a lot about that has really helped his draft stock has been Trayvon Walker out of Georgia. And I watched the combine. Again, I'm not the biggest college football fan. Walker didn't get much of an opportunity at Georgia because they kind of sub guys in and out. They have so much talent on that defense. Had 6.5 sacks last year, but the guy's 40 time was ridiculous. A 4.51 40 time for a guy that weighs nearly 275 pounds. People don't feel Trayvon Walker is set at any specific position right now. He brings a lot of versatility. I think he's a really good pick here at 8th overall. I'm going to give Walker the combine warrior to the Atlanta Falcons at 8th overall. Let's scroll down. Let's go to the Seattle Seahawks, who, of course, just made that trade, trading away Russell Wilson, and suddenly they find themselves very high in this year's draft. And a lot of people are going to say that the Seahawks could go with a quarterback in this scenario. I have Willis off the board. I think Seattle's going to wait a year. I think they're going to try to shore up the other needs on this team. When I think about Seattle, I think about the offensive line. I watched a lot of their games on primetime last year, and their offensive line is probably even worse than the New York Giants is. You got Charles Cross staring you in the face here. He dropped all the way down to 9. A lot of people have him going 6th overall to the Carolina Panthers. In this scenario, I'm going to have them getting their tackle of the future. Charles Cross goes to the Seattle Seahawks. They're able to protect their future quarterback. 10th overall, we got the New York Jets. The Jets, of course, went with Kyle Hamilton, probably more of a BPA pick there at 4 overall. Now they're back on the clock at 10. And they could go offensive line. I could see them taking Kenyon Green. The New York Giants, of course, New York Jets, rather, of course, like I said earlier, I've really addressed that offensive line in recent drafts. But one thing they really need, they need a number one weapon for their young quarterback with Zach Wilson. They got a couple of nice young wide receivers there, but they don't have a high-end wide receiver. Now, this may change after free agency because the Jets do have some money to spend. They may go out there and spend at the wide receiver position, but I can only go based off of now. And right now, if I was a Jets fan, I'd be looking at my roster and I'd say to myself, hey, Garrett Wilson was really impressive at the combine, a really talented wide receiver out of Ohio State. I think he ran in the high 4.3s, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember, but he had a really impressive 40 time. He was the talk of the combine. I'm going to have the Jets taking the first wide receiver off the board at 10th overall, which is going to bring us to Washington. And when I did my first mock draft, I had Washington going quarterback. I actually had them going with Malik Willis. That, of course, has since changed, being that they traded for Carson Wentz. Now, you could argue that they could still go quarterback. Maybe they go Kenny Pickett. They could use Wentz as kind of a stopgap quarterback. But the way I look at it is this. You just traded 2 third-round picks to bring in a veteran, a guy that is at least still probably an average starting quarterback in the NFL. He is more than good enough to man the fort for a few years until such time I feel like I could go out and get my quarterback. I don't think Washington would have traded away that much draft capital if they were head over heels in love with a quarterback in this draft. I don't believe in forcing a quarterback pick. I don't think Washington does so here. So what are they going to do? They're going to go out there and they're going to try to help their quarterback. Their newly acquired quarterback. They're going to get the other Ohio State wide receiver, Chris Olave, who, much like Garrett Wilson, had a really impressive combine, a speedster in his own right. Again, ran a really impressive 40 time, and has been touted as one of the 2, 3, 4 best wide receivers in this draft class for quite some time. So the first 2 wide receivers off the board go 10 and 11 to the New York Jets and the Washington football team, which is going to bring me to the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to have the Vikings. I've done some research on the Vikings. I tried to do as much research as I possibly could. Maybe some people view this as a reach. He was being mocked much earlier a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to have the Minnesota Vikings going cornerback. That seems to be one of the bigger needs on that football team right now from some of the research that I've done. Derek Stingley, like I said, was being mocked top 5, top 6 a couple of weeks ago. I know I've seen it some mocks. He's gone in the high teens, low 20s. I'm going to have Minnesota taking him here 12th overall, being the second cornerback off the board after Ahmad Sauce Gardner. So we're up to pick number 13, and that's going to bring up the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns, again, the research that I've done, a lot of people feel like they need a wide receiver. And there's definitely some very good wide receivers in this draft class. Of course, they lost Odell Beckham last year. I believe they're losing Jarvis Landry, if I'm not mistaken. They need more help there for Baker Mayfield. There's some very talented wide receivers in this draft class. They're going to get the big fella, Drake London out of USC. I think he's 6'4", physical specimen. A lot of people really like him, and a lot of people have him mocked to the Cleveland Browns. That's what I'm going to have here. I'm going to have Drake London. So suddenly 3 wide receivers have gone in the first 13 picks of this year's draft, which is pretty status quo. It seems to be where they know, at this point in the draft, usually have 2 or 3 wide receivers off the board. 14th overall. This could go a lot of ways. I'm going to go with Tyler Linderbaum for the Baltimore Ravens at 14th overall. If he doesn't go to Baltimore, I think there's a very good chance the Eagles could snatch him up either at 15 or 16. I don't really see Linderbaum falling much further than this. Maybe he does. I have seen him fall to the mid to late 20s. If he does, I think the New York Giants should strongly consider trading back up into the first round. But I'm going to have the Baltimore Ravens going out there and getting the best center in this year's draft class. And a lot of people feel like he could be a transcendent talent. People talk about his size. He was a bit undersized. I think he came in 10 pounds lighter than people anticipated for the combine. But when you watch that guy for a center is super athletic. And I think Baltimore is going to find themselves a really good interior offensive lineman. Eagles on the clock now for the next 2 picks. Eagles could go wide receiver. So far, I have 3 wide receivers off the board. There's a lot of other talented wide receivers. They, of course, have taken a first-round wide receiver, I think, in each of the last 2 drafts, and sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't. But in this scenario, I'm actually going to go heavy defense for the Philadelphia Eagles with their 3 picks. Eagles did a really good job last year of accruing as much draft capital as they possibly could. And I think about that defense. One thing I always think about with the Philadelphia Eagles, they always have a really strong defensive line. Fletcher Cox is getting up there in age. One guy that really stood out at the combine was Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis ran, it was like a 4.8 something 40, super athletic out of Georgia, one of my favorite players in this year's draft class, and I think will be the first defensive tackle off the board. I'm going to have the Philadelphia Eagles going out there and snagging him at 15th overall. Jordan Davis goes to the Eagles, and they go out there and get themselves another really good interior defensive lineman. Right after that pick, I'm going to have them continuing to rebuff that defensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles, and David Ajabo out of Michigan will be a Philadelphia Eagle. A lot of people feel like he possesses the upside even higher than Aiden Hutchinson. A lot of people really like him, needs to kind of grow into it. He hasn't been playing football that long, but a really impressive prospect. And I got him going to the Eagles there at 16th overall. Not too happy about that as a New York Giants fan. Next up, we've got the Chargers. Had Jordan Davis fallen to 17 for the Chargers, I would have taken him there. A lot of people talk about how the Chargers need to rebuff that run defense for that football team. Another thing they talk about, they need stronger corner play. Maybe they go a wide receiver, but they just signed Mike Williams to an extension, so I don't really see that there. Could potentially go offensive line. They, of course, took Rashawn Slater last year. Not going to do that either. I'm going to have them taking a cornerback here. I'm going to have them taking McDuffie. Maybe some people feel that's a bit of a reach, but I've seen Trent McDuffie mock to the Chargers a ton. I've read that the Chargers are impressed with him, and I'm going to have the Chargers going out there and getting the cornerback from Washington. Next up, we got the New Orleans Saints, and so far there's only been one quarterback off the board, and there could easily be a trade up, right? If the Saints really like him, maybe they jump to the 13 range. I'm going to have them taking the second quarterback off the board. Of course, Jameis Winston could be back, but more than likely, even if he is, will not be the long-term answer for the New Orleans Saints. Kenny Pickett is still there. I'm not in love with Kenny Pickett personally. I'm not head over heels in love with him, but he's a good prospect. He's a solid prospect, and it's pretty good value here at 18th overall for the Saints. I don't know who their new how their new coach is going to be in terms of with the quarterbacks. Sean Payton probably would have gotten the most out of him. The Saints have a pretty good offensive line. Pickett comes in there. Hopefully they get him a couple of weapons in this draft because the Saints certainly need it. But Pickett to the New Orleans Saints at 18th overall. That's going to bring us back to the Philadelphia Eagles for their third pick in the last 5. And now they're at 19. And again, I could easily go wide receiver. And if they go wide receiver, it's probably what most people would have them pencil do. Could go offensive line as well. They do have a pretty strong offensive line to begin with, though. I am going to triple down on the defense. One thing that I always hear about from Eagles fans that they need is a linebacker. They never draft first-round linebackers. If they're ever going to do it, this would be the year to do it. They have 3 first-round picks. You're getting pretty good value here for Devin Lloyd. I know Devin Lloyd's combine was underwhelming. He ran a much slower 40 time than people anticipated. I still love him as a prospect. He's got great side-to-side quickness. I think projects as a very good defensive player at the NFL level. So now the Eagles got a Jabo. They got themselves a D tackle. And they got themselves a linebacker in Devin Lloyd, kind of doing similar to what the Dallas Cowboys did last year when they focused heavily on the defensive side of the football. Next up, 20th overall, I'm going to have the Steelers taking the third quarterback off the board, but maybe not the quarterback some of you may think. I'm going to actually have 5 quarterbacks going in the first round. This is my third. He had a really good combine. I'm going to have Desmond Ridder out of Cincinnati. Pretty impressive prospect and probably had the second best combine, or at least was the second most talked about quarterback at the combine. Desmond Ridder out of Cincinnati, dual threat quarterback. Obviously, the Steelers need one with Big Ben's retirement, so they go out and get their quarterback there at 20th overall. Next up, we got the New England Patriots. Patriots are tough to mock for. They very rarely go with wide receivers. Could go line. Obviously, they got the young quarterback there, and Mac Jones could use another wide receiver. I'm going to have them stick it to the defensive line here, though. And there's a prospect here that I think fits their scheme very well. He kind of fell a little bit in my mock, and he just seems like the type of player that Bill Belichick will want to go out there and draft, and that's George Karlaftis. Karlaftis may be the type of player that doesn't necessarily blow you away. When you from a physical standpoint, from an athletic standpoint, I should say, but he's just a really good football player, and I think he's going to do great things there for the New England Patriots at number 21 overall. Next up, the Raiders. We're going to take our second linebacker off the board, another player on that Georgia defense, that being Nakobe Dean. Many feel he's the best linebacker in this year's draft class. The Raiders could use a little bit of a bump there at that position. Pretty good value there at number 22 overall. Number 23, we got the Arizona Cardinals. One player I've seen mocked to them a whole hell of a lot has been Jermaine Johnson. Had a pretty good combine out of Florida State. Went there. I think he had like 12 or 13 sacks this past year. Had a really impressive year. Talented edge prospect. I like him here to the Arizona Cardinals at number 23 overall. That's going to bring us to the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys for me were hard. At first, I had them going Kenyon Green. Definitely could go that route. Actually, no, I have them going Kenyon Green. I was going to say at first I had them going Zion Johnson. Cowboys need to rebuff that offensive line. I think they're going to go here, especially if one of those two prospects are here, Kenyon Green or Zion Johnson. Cowboys do that. You know, they've been a team historically that has always focused heavily on the offensive line, maybe not so much in recent years because they did a great job of building it up over a 4 or 5 year stretch. They're going to get back to it. They need to rebuff that offensive line a bit. You got the best guard, at least arguably the best guard in this year's draft at number 24 overall. It's a really good pick for the Dallas Cowboys. I think the New York Giants should consider strongly trading back up if Kenyon Green drops in the first round. Big fan of his. Who knows how far he'll drop, though. Really good player. Next up, we're going to go with the other defensive tackle in this draft here, going to the Buffalo Bills. Another guy who absolutely blew it away at the combine, much like his teammate. We're going to go with another Georgia defensive tackle. A little bit early, I'm sure a lot of Bills fans may look at this and say it's a little bit early. Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia. Everything I read about the Buffalo Bills, they need to strongly improve that run defense. Wyatt could do that for you. Really impressive athlete for his position. The Bills go out there and fill a hole. Next up, Tennessee Titans. We're going to have them taking the second interior offensive lineman in this year's draft. The guy that I am hoping and praying falls to the New York Giants at 36th overall. He does not in this mock. Zion Johnson out of Boston College. One of the better guards in this year's draft. Tennessee needs some help on that front. They go out there and they get it. So 2 guards off the board along with a center so far, along with a few tackles. Next up, the Bucs. Bucs could go a lot of ways, but of course they lost Tom Brady this year. Sam Howell, pretty impressive prospect, and he has impressed at the Senior Bowl, had a strong combine. They're going to go out there. They're going to get their future quarterback. I know they have Trask on the roster. I'm going to still have them going quarterback. Sam Howell to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Next up, Green Bay Packers. Packers, of course, brought back their quarterback. What do you think Aaron Rodgers is going to want? He's going to want some help on that offense. Finally, for the first time in Aaron Rodgers' career, the Green Bay Packers go out there and draft him a weapon in the first round, and they're going to do so with Treylon Burks out of Arkansas. He was the talk before the combine of potentially being the first wide receiver off the board, a physical specimen out of Arkansas. A little bit underwhelming there in that first combine. It's dropped him down some mocks, and in this scenario, he drops right in Aaron Rodgers' lap at 28th overall. Now I'm going to have my first trade. Bear with me. I'm going to do this real quick. I wanted to have one trade and one spot I could see. I've heard a lot of people talk about how the Miami Dolphins want to trade out of the first round. Well, in this scenario, they're able to do so. They're going to trade with a team that could potentially use a quarterback, and it's going to be the 5th quarterback off the board. The Miami Dolphins are going to trade with the Atlanta Falcons. Let's simulate the trade real quick. Dolphins are going to give up pick 29. Falcons will say give up pick 43, 58. And maybe a future 4th, just to make the trade go through. Falcons are going to trade up. They're going to get their that trade was declined. Okay. Regardless, let's just assume 29 is the Falcons. I don't want to keep you guys waiting. I'm going to have the Falcons trading up to 29 with the Miami Dolphins pick. They're going to take Matt Corral out of Mississippi. The New York Giants have actually talked to him. A lot of people feel he could potentially be there in the second round. I see a team potentially trading up, much like the Baltimore Ravens did with Lamar Jackson, and not letting that quarterback get to the second round, going up and getting their guy in the late first round. That's what I have the Atlanta Falcons trading with the Miami Dolphins doing in my first mock draft. The Dolphins go back, and they get some future draft capital. Next up, we've got the Kansas City Chiefs, and if there is one prospect in this draft that I think could fit their offense to a T, for at least from what I've seen, Jahan Dotson is a burner, and we know that the Kansas City Chiefs love their fast wide receivers. Last year, they focused heavily on fixing that offensive line. Now they're going to go out there and help Pat Mahomes even a little bit more, getting themselves the explosive wide receiver out of Penn State. Number 31, if you watch the playoffs, what is the one thing the Cincinnati Bengals need? Offensive line. I think Joe Burrow was sacked like 22, 23 times in the playoffs. They have the weapons. They have the quarterback. Well, now they got Trevor Penning falling into their lap. Could easily go much higher than this. I'm going to have Penning off the board here at 31 to the Cincinnati Bengals. And then finally, the last pick, we're going to go with Jameson Williams to the Detroit Lions. So there you have it. That was my mock draft. I don't know what just happened. Let's see the full results here, and we'll go over it real quick. Aiden Hutchinson to the Jacksonville Jaguars. We had Kayvon Thibodeau, Aquanu, Kyle Hamilton to the New York Jets. The Giants, of course, I got Evan Neal at 5. Malik Willis goes to Carolina at 6. Ahmad Sauce Gardner, the New York Giants go out there and get their cornerback at 7. Trayvon Walker, the edge rusher to the Falcons at 8. Charles Cross, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Derek Stingley, Drake London, Tyler Linderbaum. Eagles double up on defense with their 2 picks, Jordan Davis and David Ajabo, Trent McDuffie, Kenny Pickett, Devin Lloyd, Desmond Ritter, George Karlaftis, Nakobe Dean, Jermaine Johnson, Kenyon Green, Devontae Wyatt, Zion Johnson, Sam Howell, quarterback from North Carolina, goes to the Bucs. Treylon Burks to the Packers. Matt Corral to the Miami Dolphins. And then Dotson, Penning, and Jameson Williams are the final picks. So there's my mock draft. Wanted to get that up for you guys. It's been about 25 minutes. Tried to keep this mock as quick as I could. Like I said, I'm going to have a lot more scenarios for you guys. New York Giants trading up, New York Giants trading down. There's a lot of options for the Giants this year. But this is the way, at least as of now, I see the draft playing out for the New York Giants. If Evan Neal is not there, I still think the New York Giants are probably still going to lean towards Charles Cross with that 5th pick, knowing that the Panthers could potentially take him, and they could probably still get Sauce Gardner at 7. At least that's the way I see it right now. Of course, if Kayvon Thibodeau drops, then everything changes. If the Giants like Thibodeau, they could certainly take him. But in this mock, I didn't have that happening. Giants go out there, they get their tackle, they get themselves an impact player in that defense, and then they probably look towards potentially trying to shore up the interior part of that offensive line, maybe going out there, getting themselves an edge rusher in the 2nd round. They have some options after that. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.